So welcome on this 4th of July weekend, and many thanks to Asha and the guys for that great music. I hope you all had a great 4th. I know it was a different one for all of us. I personally missed going over to Judy T's and sitting on the lawn and watching those great fireworks, and I hope that next year we'll be able to do that again. The bad news for you, Judy, is yes, it's now a one world institution. So some of you may remember that in years past, on 4th of July weekends, I have injected some trivia because I love trivia and I love history. And the July 4th weekend is a great time to put the two of them together. So I think it's a tradition worth reviving. So today I have a July 4th trivia test for you. And I know we're remote and I know it's going to be different than if we're in person, but it's going to be fun anyway. So I'm going to ask you some questions and you can post your answer in the chat or you can keep it to yourself. But let's just have a little 4th of July fun. So this quiz, it's 3 questions, I've kept it short, comes from the LA Times. Question 1, get ready. Which of these events actually happened on July 4th, 1776? A, the US declared victory in the Revolutionary War. B, a group of patriots dressed as Native Americans tossed British tea into the harbor to protest excessive taxation by the British. C, the Declaration of Independence was finalized. D, the U.S. Constitution was finalized. Or E, Paul Revere rode from Boston to Lexington to Concord to warn the Patriots that the British would attack by sea. Okay, got your answers? It is C. The Declaration of Independence was finalized on July 4th, 1776. And was adopted by the Second Continental Congress, but delegates didn't even begin to sign it until August 2nd, 1776, when Timothy Matlack, who was the assistant to the Secretary of Congress, provided a clean copy. Okay, so back then, it not being the age of Twitter, the British didn't find out that we had even drafted a Declaration of Independence until August 10th. Okay, I'm not going to ask for show of chat how many got that right. Second question, which founding father did not sign the Declaration of Independence? A, Thomas Jefferson. B, Alexander Hamilton. C, Samuel Adams. Or D, Benjamin Franklin. Okay, got your answers? The answer is B, Alexander Hamilton. Although he played instrumental roles in the Revolution and in crafting the Constitution, he did not sign the Declaration of Independence. All right, so I hope everyone's doing well. Final question. When was the first 4th of July celebration? A, in 1777 on the 1-year anniversary. B, in 1865 to unify the country after the Civil War. C, in 1936 during the Great Depression. Or D, in 1786 on the 10-year anniversary. Okay, you probably don't know this. This is a little known fact. A is the answer. The founders, that was in 1777 on the 1-year anniversary. And here's a little more trivia connected with that. The founders originally intended to mark July 2nd as the official Independence Day. Why? Because it was on July 2nd that they voted to declare themselves independent from Great Britain, but they didn't get around to start signing it until July 4th. They also forgot to plan the celebration for July 2nd, and so they had to boot it to July 4th. So that was the first official July 4th celebration. Okay, so that was fun. So thank you for indulging me on my historical interludes. So our topic this month is the pursuit of happiness. I thought July, in which we celebrate Independence Day, was a great month for this theme. Why? Because when you think of it, how many countries have the pursuit of happiness explicitly set out in their foundational documents? Our Declaration of Independence states, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. So what does that say? It says that our Creator gifted us with these rights that cannot be taken away. That's what unalienable means, including the right to happiness, and that it's our collective community that helps us secure and enjoy these rights. So what I want to talk about today is independence and happiness in a broader sense, in a more fundamental sense. So as I researched this topic, I learned that there are lessons that we can learn about ourselves and about our lives together from our founders and the principles they believed in enough to risk their fortunes and their lives. Despite their flaws and their prejudices and their limitations, they really did a brave and an inspirational thing. So here's one inspirational truth. When the members of the Second Continental Congress signed the Declaration of Independence, affirming for themselves and their posterity the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, it was the first time in recorded history that a people had articulated such a vision of civic life, of political governance. The first time that such a vision had been stated as the basis for the life of a nation. The notion of individual rights had been stated before. Thomas Jefferson was a devoted student of the work of Enlightenment philosopher John Locke, who first articulated that each individual had the natural right to life, liberty, and property. It is said that it was Jefferson's genius and his vision that caused him to substitute the phrase, the pursuit of happiness, for the word property. Why did he do that? Well, we speculate that the new nation was too big. The idea was too big to be based upon a notion as simple as the acquisition of property. It had to be bigger and more meaningful than that. This new nation had to be built on the majesty, on the potential of the human spirit, and nothing less would do. They weren't going to bargain their lives for just the acquisition of property. It was a profoundly revolutionary idea that common people, not kings or nobles or clergy, but everyday people like us, had those innate, God-given natural rights. The Declaration of Independence was both a declaration of the dignity and value of the individual, as much as it was a love song of hope for this new nation. People didn't live to serve the king, the state. Enlightenment philosophers said it was exactly the other way around. Authority rose up. There was no government without the consent of the governed, of all of us. Every time you get one of those ads in the mail advertising a candidate for office and looking for your vote, remember that thought. So, did the founders have a limited vision of who the common man was? I've said that word man a lot. I haven't said woman. It was focused on men because of the culture of the time. Surely they did. We are still living with the legacy of racism that they and that later generations left us. They excluded from this promise every African American man, woman, and child, seeing them only through the prism of racial prejudice and ignorance. Although they spoke of human freedom and equality, many were slave owners, including Jefferson. It's impossible to get your arms around the pain, the loss, and the death that culture and these decisions they made back then caused to millions of men and women down through the years. We are still working as a nation on healing those wounds. I can't even call them scars, because for far too many Americans, they are still open. And for far too many Americans, they are still felt every day. We are still working on that national healing. The good news is that the protests in recent weeks and the energy we see all around to make these founding principles real for all people show that these words from over 240 years ago still hold their meaning, even though we so frequently fail to live up to them. We still point to them and rely on them as we work to widen the circle of those who can enjoy these fundamental freedoms as our national consciousness grows and as we, as a collective, hopefully become wiser and kinder. These principles are still our true north that promise to lead us home. The founders knew that ideas of liberty would grow and that the change would not take long. These ideas were not static. George Will wrote in a column for the Washington Post a while back in which he noted that in 1824, James Madison, who had been in retirement 37 years after serving as the Constitutional Convention's prime mover, noted that the 1787 language of our Constitution is already undergoing interpretations unknown to its founders. 37 years after the document was adopted and the ratification process began, the understanding of what those words meant was changing. Will wrote that Madison knew that the purport of the text would evolve with the changeable meaning of the words composing it. What does that mean? It means that every new generation gives new life to these principles. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness back then. Today's outgrowth of that same principle, Black Lives Matter. We give new meaning to these eternal principles as we apply them to our lives. When I was in Navy boot camp many, many years ago, I was put up for a recruit award that required an interview on what made the United States exceptional or different. The good news was that I had just read an editorial in the New York Times that talked about that very same thing. So once again, life proves that timing is everything. Anyway, the argument I made was that we were different because we were a country founded not on location, not on land, but on principle. The French love and defend France because it's always been their land. They've always lived there ever since they were wandering around as Franks. They've always lived on that piece of geography. The same is true for the Germans, the Russians, the English. It's a tie to the land, to the place. Now, we love the land, but that's not the basis we were founded on. We're a nation founded on articulated, written principles of freedom, equality, and opportunity. That was entirely new. We were a real experiment, what some have called the Great Experiment. We're still an experiment in process. We hear a lot on July 4th about the pursuit of happiness, the phrase I read earlier, which was written by Thomas Jefferson into the Declaration. We often take that phrase to mean individual pleasures, individual fulfillment. You all get out of my way because I have the right to my own individual pursuit of happiness. We've seen a lot of that recently when we look at things like the debate over wearing masks, don't we? I have no obligation to intrude on my personal liberty to do anything to make you any safer. My individual liberty matters most. It's enshrined in the Constitution, and if you get sick, that's your problem. However, history suggests that a meaning like that is not what Jefferson meant. We forget that the phrase has a rich history, that Jefferson was a lover of Greek and Roman philosophy. His writings suggest that its meaning to him was much broader, and I think his meaning can be a lesson for us today as we face the challenges we are facing every day. Jefferson got the phrase, the pursuit of happiness, from John Locke in a 1690 essay called Concerning Human Understanding. In it, Locke wrote that the necessity of pursuing happiness is the foundation of liberty. Locke went on to caution against mistaking imaginary for real happiness, saying that the pursuit of happiness led to our highest good. I don't know about you, but as I was reading this, I got a flash of the quote from His Holiness the Dalai Lama when he said, "The very purpose of our life is to seek happiness." Do you see how these universal principles span time and culture and distance? The Dalai Lama didn't mean transitory pleasures, and neither did Jefferson. Jefferson took this notion of Locke's and expanded upon it, drawing on his understanding of Greek and Roman ideas of civic virtue, right action, and the good life. He wrote that happiness was the aim of life and virtue the foundation of happiness. The idea that Jefferson put into the Declaration was not that we each have the right to as many iPhones as we want or as much stuff that we want, or I get to hoard all the Lysol from the grocery store before you get to it. It was the opposite, that our individual happiness comes from the exercise of the virtues that enable us to live in community: peace, understanding, courage, patience, integrity. Our highest good on an individual and on a civic level comes from living out of our highest selves for the greater good of the whole community. That was the basis of this new nation. It was a vision that since its drafting has been seen as a universal declaration of human rights by many around the world. In addition, in his February 22nd, 1861 address in Independence Hall in Philadelphia, President Abraham Lincoln identified these words in the Declaration as the basis for his political philosophy, saying, "I have never had a feeling politically that did not spring from the sentiments embodied in the Declaration of Independence." It's also the wisdom found in so many of the faith traditions that we explore here at One World. Think about it. Think about the golden rule found in each of the world's enduring faith traditions as a statement of basic principle. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Rabbi Hillel taught that this principle was the entire basis of Torah, summed up in that one idea. It's a vision of how we show up in this world, what we put first, how we manifest the love that is our essence. Living out this truth deepens and awakens us as well as connects us. It's when I choose instead to insist that my liberty permits me to disregard or even disrespect your needs, is when my world becomes smaller and more fearful, and when I lose the chance to step into that greater vision of happiness and community that is so close within our reach if we continue to reach for it together. As I said above, our founders fell short in many ways. The good news is that their prejudices, their flaws, and their limitations, and their failures are now getting the examination that will move us forward as a nation. However, as much as they failed in practice, the values that they gave us in our founding documents still call us to be better and more inclusive and more just. These principles can still be our true north as we build our better and our future community. We have the chance to do better, to make that vision a reality, if we understand that our deepest happiness comes from our connections with each other. We can widen the circle of community to embrace new meanings, new and stronger connections, and new hope. Let's take that energy forward as we celebrate this 4th of July weekend. And let's make it a celebration, certainly, but also a challenge. Thank you so much for watching. If you're interested in learning more about One World Spiritual Center, please visit us at www.oneworldspiritualcenter.net. Thanks so much.